Thanks. When we talk about burnout, we talk about three things, and we don't always clarify what we're talking about. We use it kind of interchangeably. So the first is depression. And if you're depressed, that's a medical problem that requires medical help. I'm not a medical professional, and I will give you no advice on this topic. And the second thing is straight up overwork. You can't work constantly. Everything we know about 80-hour work weeks says that, one, we're not working them when we think we are, and two, they're not sustainable. I really like this. You get sent to bar if you work too much. And the third thing is what I want to talk about today. We expect and ask more of our jobs than we get from them. And so there's this gap of what we need and what we have. And if it goes on for too long or it gets too large, that's when we start to feel burnt out. And I often think that these things can go together, right? Like, I know for myself, being creative is so much a part of being happy that, like, burnout, depression, like, where does one begin and the other one end? But they are distinct problems. So a couple of years ago, I moved to Australia to run an iOS team. And we sent to the App Store in 3 months. We got feature parity with Android, which had been started before I arrived within 6 months. And I kept my hours like 45 a week, but I would still come home like Friday night and feel like my brain had bled out through my eyes. And then it was done. And they were like, great job. This guy's going to ship next month. Go and help him. He didn't ship next month, or the month after. In fact, I think it was about 8 months late. But it was really, really hard to go from running my own little team to working on a project that just really wasn't running effectively, and in this position where I had no influence over making that better. Add to this the super miserable experience of being harassed at work, the absolutely awful HR process that ensued. I was in a really bad place emotionally, and my job was just not fulfilling. And so I tried to double down on my career. I had this idea, I'll just work Saturdays. I just need to work harder, And I was like, I'm going to do a side project. So I started doing this side project, and then there was a reorg, and it was clear that that side project was never going to launch either. And I realized that what I needed was to ship. That's what I missed. And that the answer was not internal side projects, but my own personal side project. As an extra thing, I think this was the worst manager I ever had, but he explained to me that he believed that by never giving me positive feedback, he was training me not to need any. If anyone's contemplating this, it doesn't work. And so as I shifted my focus to external projects, I got some of much needed positive feedback as well. So it turns out that this was not an entirely random realization, and I didn't invent anything here. There's 6 main causes of professional burnout. There's this thing called the Maslach burnout inventory, and there's a book that's associated with it called The Truth About Burnout. So the first one is lack of control. That sounds familiar, eh? Right? And then the next one, insufficient reward. Also familiar. Lack of community. And I read through this list and I'm like, because this was the first project in a while that I'd been on where I was the only woman on the team. And there were a number of reasons why I felt very lonely, but that was one of them. And the fourth, absence of fairness. I'd been successful, and the result was that I ended up in a place where I felt like I couldn't succeed. And the fifth is conflict in values. And I value execution on a product. And this team, they'd kind of decided that what they should be doing is building a platform to build their product on. Obviously, I disagree with that, but this is not a talk about poor engineering decisions, because that would need way more than 25 minutes. And the sixth is work overload. So I look at this list, and I'm like, these are all problems that we could use side projects to help with, except for number 6, right? But yeah, probably it would actively hurt with number 6, I do see that. But it's really hard to think of a side project when you're feeling, a bit dead inside. And it's really hard to think that you have anything to offer anybody else's side project when the people that you work with day to day don't seem to appreciate what you do. And my solution was to go back to my most recently abandoned side project. We all have one, right? And so I'd had this idea that, when you look on your photos on Flickr or whatever, I thought it would be cool to visualize a photo stream, just pulling out the dominant colors from them. So you'd see the cool whites of Iceland, the lush greens of Bali, the orange and reds of a Canadian fall, and it would kind of tell its own story in this abstract way. So I'd got as far as this layout. So this is the most efficient way to lay out circles. It's called a sunflower layout. And so I just was changing the RGB value. And in the one on the right, I just made it really close together. And I kind of like this because I imagine if I was to time travel, I would jump through something that looked like that. But yeah. Anyway, so the next step was to just pull the dominant color out of a photo, right? And I was like, someone has solved this. The internet will help me. The internet failed me. But it did provide me with some useful information. So firstly, an image is just like an array of pixels, and a pixel is just a square of color. And the second thing is that there's this color space called the HSB or the HSV color space. So when we think about RGB, color's really on a cube, but the HSV is actually a lot closer to the way that we think about color. So the different colors go round in the circle, and those are the hue. Like the saturation, which we might think about as intensity, is the diameter. And then the height is brightness. So at the bottom, everything is black. So I was like, OK, count the pixels, check the color, put them in buckets, and we'll have that dominant color. It'll be fine. And this totally worked. But it turns out that the dominant color is often a little bit sludgy, right? So the bar of color on the left, that's the dominant color that was extracted from the image. And then on the right, there's this, I started making these test images to see what happened. So I would only show things in a certain range of the dominant color. And so I started making these cool partially colored images, and I could see kind of better what was going on. So I made my visualization, and here it is. It wasn't quite as incredible as I'd imagined, And it also took a really long time. It took at least 30 minutes to calculate these, right? And one of the things that I discovered is that for different images, you needed different settings to really kind of capture what I would perceive as the dominant color, which kind of makes sense, right? Because the way that we perceive things, we abstract things, we summarize things. Dominant color is largely a matter of perception. But I considered this to be the completion of a successful side project, and I moved on to other things. But then I got asked to write a book chapter, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I wrote this algorithm, so I could write a book chapter. And so I made it into a little photo editing app. I did all of this in processing, by the way. And so whilst I was doing that, I started trying to put it online. And I'd use processing Java, not processing JavaScript. I'm sorry. I know this is a JavaScript conference. And so as I started trying to put this online, I started running into things, right? Because obviously, I didn't want to deal with image uploading. So then I had cross-site scripting permissions and stuff. And at some point along this journey of yak shaving, I remembered that I'm an expert mobile developer. And so I was like, Cate, why are you building a mediocre desktop-only web app when clearly this should be a mobile app? So I started building, and I got a working prototype. I ran into terrible performance problems, and then I ended up creating a library for testing, for generating and comparing images on iOS. And I also ended up optimizing for space and time. So yes, you heard that correctly. I wrote an algorithm. I optimized it for space and time outside of the context of a technical interview. It does occasionally happen. So the app's called Show and Hide. It'll be out pretty soon. And along the way, I relocated back to the UK. I got off a work permit. I quit the job I hated. And I started working for myself. But this kind of remains my side project because I think the definition of side project is things you do for love, not money. But let's go back to that list. Because now I had control. Sometimes too much control, but I definitely had control. Rewards. People started to appreciate my work, which was tied to other things I did at the same time, but still, I got much more positive feedback from the community than I ever did from that terrible manager. Community. I had editors and support on the book chapter. I work on Show and Hide with a designer and a branding person. Fairness. Proceeds from the book go to charity, and indie apps don't really make money, so I'm excited to get the same share of nothing as everybody else. Values. So the kind of project that I burnt out on, it was just like an enormous yak shaving project, And I did shave a lot of yaks in this process, right? But every one of them filled a need, and I was able to share the outcome with other people. So from this testing library I made, building a talk and a workshop out of techniques I use for doing really good test coverage on iOS, getting the processing time down from around 10 seconds to instant. I solved actual problems, not made-up engineer problems. But there's an elephant in the room here, and its name is time, right? We only have 24 hours in the day, 168 hours in the week, and some of us have a bunch of responsibilities that others don't. And I'm not going to tell you that you can just make time if you just try harder. Your schedule. And if you don't, there's things like rescue time that can help you be honest with yourself about how you're spending your time. And I'm not going to tell you to stop watching TV either, right? I'm always baffled by those talks that are just work all day, stop watching TV, come home and work all evening, and everything will be fine. I've never been watching TV all evening. It doesn't mean I don't have unlimited hours to work, right? I also just don't think that's sustainable. But I am going to make two suggestions. So firstly, are you doing stuff that you could just not do? And for me, as a woman working in tech, I ended up doing a bunch of stuff that, thankless emotional labor, basically. And a lot of it was around trying to improve the representation of women. Ladies, we don't have to do this. Giving this up freed up a lot of time, I cannot even tell you, because I think that stuff that you do that is not generally valued is a great place to start looking for things that you can not do and free up time. And I get that you wouldn't do it if you didn't think it was important. That was me too. But you can make a choice to prioritize what makes you happier over what you think you should be doing, but nobody else is going to. We know that women leave tech at a much greater rate than men, and the best thing that any of us can do is be happier and fulfilled in our careers. Secondly, different kinds of time allow for different kinds of progress, right? And so if you use the time when you feel on top of your game really well, then you can set yourself up to achieve things when you're feeling kind of meh. So, if you have tests that you need to write, if you spec them out when you're feeling I'm really on top of things, then you can write them later when you're feeling a bit life is hard. Maybe even when you're watching TV. You can write all your boilerplate UI code when you're half asleep on a Saturday morning, and then you can kind of fix it and hook it up later in the day. I often start with something that I consider to be a warm-up task. just if I'm not really feeling like super productive. And sometimes that will get done, but sometimes it turns into a little spiral and I build on it. The thought I want you to take away today is a question. What if you expected more from your side projects and less from your job? And if our side projects, what does your human need? And if our side projects involve other people, how can we give them what they need? It's worth asking someone, what do you want to get out of this project? Because they might tell you, but we have this handy list that we can refer back to, and we can see if we're maybe meeting people's needs on that. So control. Control is super easy if you just own something, right? But I think of control as being able to influence the outcome. You don't have to be in charge. You just need to feel like you can make a difference. But if we want to give people control, we have to give up a little bit ourselves and we have to trust them. And this is really hard, right? It means that we have to accept a little bit of chaos. Reward. There's this book called The 5 Love Languages, which seems like a bizarre thing to mention in this context, but it is the best book that I've found that understands that different people appreciate different kinds of appreciation. One of them is touch, and just ignore that one. Touch is never an appropriate way to reward someone in a professional context. The other ones are words, so you can tell people they did a great job, Gifts. Now, these don't have to be big, like, oh, I found this ebook that I thought you might like. Time, mentoring people. Acts of service, and again, this can be really small, like you're co-working and you make a point to make them a cup of tea, right? Reward is what makes people feel like their contribution is appreciated, whatever that is. Community, connection to other humans. I think it's worth building healthy communities on its own account, but let's just set that aside for a moment. Because people will bond together over a common enemy, but this is a short-term and not a long-term strategy. And one thing we're seeing in open source right now is some projects are really investing in their communities. They're ramping up newbies, they're adding codes of conduct, and we see others doubling down on this fantasy of a meritocracy. And we're going to see what thrives in the long term. Fairness, treating people equitably. Can you be transparent so it's clear what's being rewarded and why? Can you work to remove bias? Because we know in this industry that we have a problem with the way that we treat women and the way that we treat minorities. And we get this shit at work. I got called the C word by a colleague, amongst other things, and it was horrible, But I put up with this stuff day to day because they paid me really well to do that. And because I was on a work permit. But I don't want to put up with this stuff in the things that I do in my free time. And I don't think I'm alone there. This is part of being fair, and this is part of being a good community. Values. If your project's values-based, you can communicate them, and you can bring decisions back to them. So I have some examples. So the first pull request project, so it's to help people make their first contribution to open source software. So control, it makes contributing to open source seem possible. Rewards, you get to be someone who has contributed to open source. Community, it's designed to support you as you do that. Fairness, it's about making open source more accessible to people who've historically been left out. And values, right? Like this is open source software, right? There's this idea that we all use it and we should all get back to it. Model view culture, so if you haven't heard of model view culture, it's a publication of cultural and social critique focused on tech. And they solicit contributions to the community and people write for it. Control, you decide what you write about. Rewards, they actually pay writers, right? It's very rare to get paid for your writing, so I feel like, for me, it's always been that I got paid to write rather than how much money I made from it. Community, This publication is a contribution to the community that cares about inclusivity in tech. And fairness, right? Like, this is the whole aim of social justice, right? Regardless of whatever Gamergate is spouting now. And values, it's built around these values of inclusion, and you see that in every issue and every article. And the final example is Technically Speaking. So this is a newsletter that a friend and I run, and we try and encourage people in their public speaking, right? So our goal or our pitch is kind of like, we're like the mentor that shows up in your inbox every week saying, you have something to say, and here are some resources that might be helpful. Control, it's all about making things seem more possible, kind of demystifying things. Reward, maybe you get to come somewhere like this, right, and share whatever it is that you've been excited about on stage. You get to be a public speaker. Community. So we run webinars most month. We engage with people on Twitter. We take kind of questions, and we find the resources that they need. Fairness. So part of this is about demystifying this process and this idea that you don't need to be chosen, that you can put yourself forward. And we highlight things like travel costs because we think transparency there makes things fairer. Values. So this is the last one, but it's a really big one for us. So like I said, we think conferences should cover travel costs. So we weigh that in what CFPs that we include. And we also believe in inclusive events. So we'll only share things with a code of conduct. I'm not going to pretend that a code of conduct is like a high bar of inclusivity, but I do think it's a new minimum. It's pretty telling when events don't have one. And more broadly than that, we curate this vision of the tech industry that we wish we saw. So we share at least 50% content from women. We actively look for other underrepresented groups to highlight and include. So if you're feeling a little burnt out, I want to leave you with the question I asked earlier. What if you expected more from your side project and less from your job? And more broadly, I want to ask, what if we as a community asked more from our side projects and less from our jobs? And I'm really happy that I got to share this talk at JSConf EU, because I know Jan and Tiffany and the other organizers all worked super hard to make it that kind of space. So thank you so much for having me.